The colony's population included children and older adults, increasing vulnerability. The decision to remain on Roanoke Island or relocate would have depended on environmental conditions and external pressures. The carved word, Croton, later found by White, suggests an intended destination rather than a distress signal. Croton Island, now known as Hatteras Island, lay to the south and was associated with a more hospitable indigenous community. If the settlers moved, it was likely a gradual process rather than a sudden flight. Relocation would have required coordination, transport of remaining supplies, and negotiation with those already living there. Whether all colonists moved together or fragmented into smaller groups remains unknown. What is clear is that the colony continued for some period after White's departure. Survival was sustained without documentation, without external reinforcement, and without certainty of return. Daily life narrowed to essentials. The passage of time would have been marked by seasons rather than dates, and by the slow erosion of the connection to England that had brought them there. When John White returned to the region in August 1590, the physical traces of the colony were altered but not destroyed. The settlement structures had been dismantled rather than burned. There were no signs of a hurried evacuation. No human remains were found. The surrounding land showed evidence of deliberate departure rather than sudden violence. The most prominent clue was the word Croton carved into a post. A shorter carving, CRO, appeared on a nearby tree, though its meaning remains uncertain. The absence of the agreed-upon distress symbol suggested that the move, if it occurred, was not forced by immediate attack. This interpretation shaped early conclusions, but it did not provide closure. Despite this indication, White was unable to investigate further. Weather conditions deteriorated quickly, and attempts to reach Croton Island were repeatedly delayed. Storms damaged ships and endangered crews. With limited provisions and increasing risk, the expedition abandoned the search and returned to England. What happened to the settlers during the intervening years remains unresolved. Archaeological findings have offered partial insights but no definitive narrative. Some evidence suggests that individuals from the colony may have integrated with indigenous communities. European artifacts discovered far from Roanoke Island support this possibility, but they do not confirm scale or outcome. Attrition would have been gradual. Disease, malnutrition, and exposure were persistent threats. Small groups would have been vulnerable to environmental stress and dependent on local alliances. Over time, distinctions between settlers and surrounding populations may have blurred or disappeared. The absence of records makes it impossible to trace individual fates. Names, relationships, and timelines were lost as the colony dissolved. What had begun as a planned extension of England became a quiet process of disappearance. The settlement did not collapse in a single moment. It thinned, shifted, and eventually ceased to exist as a distinct entity.
Now the math becomes uncomfortable, because the global oil market is extremely sensitive to disruptions in supply. Iran has historically exported millions of barrels of oil per day, depending on sanctions and market conditions, and the majority of those exports flow through Kharg Island. If that export channel were significantly disrupted, global markets would respond quickly. Oil traders monitor geopolitical risk constantly. Even rumors of instability in the Persian Gulf can push energy prices higher. But the military math also reveals another imbalance. Precision cruise missiles used in modern strikes can cost hundreds of thousands to several $1 million each. Meanwhile, defending large energy facilities against aerial threats is extremely difficult. Oil terminals span huge areas. Storage tanks are massive, and pipelines stretch across kilometers of coastline. Protecting every potential target becomes expensive and sometimes impossible. This is the uncomfortable economic logic of modern strategic warfare. A relatively small strike force can threaten infrastructure worth billions of dollars. And when that infrastructure fuels a national economy, the strategic pressure becomes enormous. Now the real question is what happens next. Because conflicts in the Middle East rarely stay confined to a single strike. If oil infrastructure becomes a target, multiple escalation pathways suddenly appear. Iran could respond by increasing military pressure in nearby waters. Missile launches, drone operations, naval patrol confrontations. Shipping companies would immediately reassess the safety of routes through the Strait of Hormuz. Insurance premiums for tanker vessels could skyrocket. Some shipping firms might temporarily reroute cargo. And even small disruptions could ripple across global supply chains. Energy markets would react within hours. Financial markets would follow. Governments would begin strategic consultations. Because energy security remains one of the most important pillars of modern economies. And when energy infrastructure becomes a battlefield, the entire world starts paying attention. Kharg Island may look like a small piece of land on the map, but in reality, it represents something far larger. It is a reminder that in today's interconnected world, economic infrastructure and military strategy are deeply intertwined. Oil terminals, shipping routes, energy pipelines. These are not just industrial systems. They are strategic assets capable of shaping global stability. And when tensions rise between major powers like the United States and Iran, those assets become part of the geopolitical chessboard. The technology exists to strike almost anywhere. The real challenge is managing what happens after the strike. Because once the global energy system is pulled into a conflict, the consequences rarely stay contained. If you enjoy deep geopolitical analysis like this, consider subscribing and sharing this video.